Hello, and welcome to episode 33 of That Encyclopedia podcast with your hosts, Jacob and Will.
Hello.
Today we are harkening back to a couple of the older episodes of TEP in many respects by veering away from important historical events or figures, Chinese poets, scientists, and instead focusing on a much more humble individual, or specifically species of individuals, because today's episode concerns humpback whales, one of the most ubiquitous and, I would say, majestic animals that currently graces us here on planet Earth. The article that we are using as a foundation for this episode is reasonably informative, I would say, and it certainly elucidated many things to me that I had not even considered before, let alone been aware of. What was your impression of humpback whales pre and post Wikipedia article, Will? Have they increased in status in your eyes?
I'd say so. I'd say they've increased in status because I don't know if there was anything in particular about them as a species of whale, but more the reintroduction to the concept of a whale for me was nice. I'm a fan of whales.
The
what
concept
did I know?
of a whale.
Yeah, I like whales. I think the first thing that obviously springs to mind with whale is the scale of whale. So I'm sure we'll have one on our slide, the picture of the humpback whale versus a diver size comparison. Even as a relatively, I don't know if it's fair to say, I'm not sure what the average whale size is, but compared to others, relatively small whale, but still pretty huge. I knew that humpback whales were whales and therefore were pretty big, and I had a sort of rough idea of what they looked like. Obviously they've got some humps on their back, hence the name, but did I really know anything more than that? Probably not. I knew that in terms of whale watching, I think I've been whale watching to see humpback whales, so yeah, I ought to know that that's a thing. And it was interesting that there's a reason why it was humpback whales. Humpback whales, which I was not aware of, that they surface a lot more than the typical whale, which obviously makes them much nicer to see. I mean, the term is breach, when they throw their bodies out of the water and then splash down on their backs, and it's quite the spectacle to go out there and see these massive creatures doing that. So yeah, pretty nice. It looks like so much
fun as well. You know, I would breach all the time if I had the capacity to.
Yeah,
it's so majestic and playful. I think I agree with a lot of what you've said there. Specifically, when you talk about humpback whale size, we should note that the typical adult is 14 to 17 meters long, so roughly 7, 8, 9 times longer than your average human, and they are particularly notable for being active around the surface of the water, which is why when it comes to things like whale watching, it's often humpback whales that are specifically the goal or the target of commercial or educational watching activities, because many whales only surface to breathe or to escape predators or teach their calves how to function in whale society, but not humpbacks. They do all of these things, but they also do them to play and to prey on krill, which is their main source of nutrition, although they often consume kind of small fish as well. And regardless of prey of choice, they tend to do it using a hunting method called bubble net feeding, which involves one or many whales circling their target in kind of like a spiral or corkscrew pattern, releasing air from their blowholes, which they use to to breathe when they surface. And this creates columns of bubbles in the water, which trap the tiny little krill and kind of stun them for long enough for the whale to then open its mouth and filter feed a truly staggering and impressive amount of water and capture all of the nutrition of the animals as well. In general, you have two kinds of whales. You have the toothed whales, and then you have kind of these baleen whales, and humpback whales fall into the latter category, where they don't bite, rip, or rend anything. They just stun, consume, and filter once they've caught everything in its way. I remember as a kid being kind of terrified of that method of feeding, though, from Finding Nemo, whether they're trapped in the whale's mouth, and then it turns out it's fine, the whale just like ejects them. But I was like, oh, imagine if I'm in the water and then suddenly I'm just enveloped from behind by this enormous mouth, and that's it. I'm just consumed. And it's a fear that I'd forgotten that I had until I watched Attack on Titan some years later. I was like, damn, they're like land whales here. So this is my initial kind of introduction to whales and a bit of insight into what child me thought was terrifying.
No, I I can totally understand why you'd be terrified. I don't think, like, the scale of a whale, you know, relative to us is pretty big, but relative to a tiny fish, yeah, not pleasant at all to imagine being hunted by a whale. Now, the other section that stands out to me, given that this is an article about a species of whale, is the notable individuals segment.
Oh yes, I saw this.
So I'll just give you a brief of my favourite individual whale is Migaloo, which apparently means white fella in some Australian Aboriginal language. So Migaloo is an albino humpback whale. So we've got like one photo of Migaloo, and it's quite cool to see. You know, I like a good unique coloured. It's like a Pokemon shiny. It's a rare one. So Migaloo was first recorded in 1998. So they believed that he was male, and then in 2004 they managed to sample his genome and was like, yep, Migaloo is a male humpback whale born around 86. And yeah, this raises it makes me think about the sort of scale of whale life, the scale of whale life, and what is it that they go and do for all those years, because they live a fairly long time, right?
They do.
Fairly large mammals. They probably live over 50 years, humpback whales, some of them anyway.
Yeah, you're pretty much bang on. They normally live for about 50 years, actually. So Migaloo will be, what did you say, 86? So he's probably still with us, unless being an albino has negatively impacted his ability to avoid predation, which, to be fair, it may have done. But hopefully he's still with us.
That said, so in 2022, another white humpback whale washed up on a beach in Victoria, and people initially thought this was Migaloo, right? But this body was analysed and was actually found to be a female whale, so not Migaloo. So the second white humpback whale, unfortunately not named in this page. So there you are. There's more than one, but this means that we currently don't know where Migaloo is, because he was reported being seen in 2020, but we have no other forms of evidence of sightings for years and years. So yeah, he might still be with us. We just haven't seen him. So, what's he up to? Who knows?
It really conveys something that I felt reading through this, is how the article conveys a sense of almost emptiness through sheer scale. In the same way that when you might think about the universe and you realise that most of the universe is empty space, most of the planet is empty water, at least on the surface, right? So you look at the range of humpback whales, and basically most of the world's saltwater bodies are possible whale habitats for them. The only places that aren't are kind of more enclosed seas, like the Mediterranean, or the seas around Sweden and Finland. But even then, it's mentioned in the article that the Mediterranean population of humpback whales seems to be on the rise, and so in the next few years, it might be possible to say that they regularly inhabit the inner Mediterranean, just as they do the rest of the world's oceans. But even something as impressively large as a humpback is literally a drop in the ocean compared to its total possible range. It would be like trying to summarize humans from the range of humans on the planet, and inferring things about the continents just from the fact that humans live on all of them. It makes everything look uniform, whereas the article does take the time to point out that humpback whales are not kind of all intermingling with each other just because they can be found anywhere in the world's oceans. In reality, there are 4 or 5 distinct kind of mega populations that have some interaction but otherwise remain in the same location. So you have a population off the coast of Australia, for example, of which Migaloo would be a member, but they have no interaction with the population that you'd find in the North Sea around Iceland or Ireland, for example.
Yeah, no, I really like the range. When I saw the range of the humpback whale, I thought I'd have a look at some other whales for comparison. And actually, the scope of, I mean, when you're able to traverse water, and I don't know, there's not such. You'd think there'd be more variation in the how hospitable areas are to whales, and maybe they wouldn't go to more areas. Certainly, they don't go all over the Arctic, but actually they are pretty international, and I really like that as well. So there are these sort of whale tribes in a few different regions, but the fact that you could actually find them anywhere is a pretty cool thought to me, because it's not just the humpback whale. I guess I expected to go in and to look and to be like, okay, so this is the ocean that they're found in, but no, they do have the ability to swim large distances. There are different tribes in different parts of the world to start with, but also the ocean is not that hard for them to get around in, and it's not so inhospitable they can't go pretty much everywhere. So unlike a lot of land animals, which are very fixed to one part of the world or even regions within nations, whales have a scale that sort of reflects their actual size relative to us as well, and other animals.
I wonder if the simple English Wikipedia just says, what is their habitat, and just says water, like showing the same map. Like, I don't know, choose some salt water, hang around for a bit, there'll be a whale at some point. But I agree. I agree. Though that said, it wasn't always the case. If we go back to maybe 100 years ago or so, the humpback whale population was not doing so well, was it?
Yeah, so with reference to today, they are on the conservation status, which goes from extinct, which they are not, to least concern. Humpback whales are currently in least concern. They're not considered threatened. And I think neither is the blue whale. So whales are actually, in whale terms, having a whale of a time, I guess you could say. But yeah, as you say, the population has fluctuated. Before 2008, they were considered vulnerable. The key historical thing for whales in particular is that whaling, so hunting whales, used to be something that lots of nations engaged in, but is relatively gone now. So whale oil was a commodity. If you've played any Dishonored, you'll be familiar with whale oil. So historic whaling in the North Pacific in particular was diminishing the population there. So what was it before? So we have around 84,000 adult whales worldwide at the moment, which obviously on a human scale is pretty tiny, but we're talking about whales here, which actually made me. I was thinking, actually, I'd never considered before the concept of the conservation status and how one considers something when the natural population size, let's say, without the interference of humans, could be huge or it could be tiny. And I was thinking, how would you measure how would you attempt to quantify conservation status of something which has a natural population sort of size that is a lot smaller than other animals, right? You've got to consider a few things, but let's say that there was a species of animal which had always existed with around 100 in its population, and let's say it's knocked down to 80. How would you evaluate that in terms of threat to the species? I mean, I guess you've got to look at how fast it's been knocked down and what you'd project future numbers to look like. So I guess it is more to do with that than the absolute numbers in a species, because the absolute numbers will vary wildly. Like an ant species, I'd imagine that if the sort of I don't know the name of it, but say the common ant in the UK, if you had 84,000 of them worldwide, you might be thinking, oh, are they on the way out then?
I mean, I think the current population of the Earth's ants is in the trillions.
Yeah.
So I would be very concerned if there were fewer than 100,000.
Yeah.
It's a good point. So I think I would be inclined to suggest it's a relative value for precisely that reason, that
yes.
Individuals have different lifespans and live in different numbers and are distributed in different ways. That said, I think the assessment also considers more than just the species itself, but also the habitat that it is evolved to live in, and the danger and health status of that habitat. So there's the second lowest vulnerability is called near threatened, after least concern, which basically means that the status of the animal itself is fine, but the status of the habitat that the animal inhabits is considered threatened or vulnerable to exploitation, destruction, and so forth. And so it is likely that the population should or will be considered threatened in the near future. That's the near part of your near threatened. So I think it's a holistic metric that's used by the IUCN, which is the International Union for Conservation of Nature. But I admit I don't know the exact criteria. It would be interesting to find out, actually.
Yeah. but back to the numbers and the whaling of humpback whales. I missed the exact numbers when I was summarising earlier. So obviously we have 135,000 now. It's estimated we had only around 5,000 in the 1960s. So that is a lot less. 130,000 out of 135,000 less in the 1960s, and in the context of the humpback whale lifespan as well. That's a substantial recovery.
It's an impressive recovery, isn't it? Because, I mean, living shorter lives than humans, they'll have gone through more generational cycles. But even still, that's more than a tenfold. It's like a 15-fold increase almost, or excuse me, 30-fold increase. So very, very impressive. And it goes to show that conservation efforts can work when they're implemented universally or near universally, and they're respected. I think the relationship of Japan in particular to the whaling industry is one that is a little bit infamous and often comes under heavy criticism, because it has a long and prestigious history in the country, and basically the position of the Japanese government is that will continue in some capacity, but for everyone else it took a bit of political capital, but no one considers eating whale in most of the world to be a particularly common thing. If you go to the fish and chips in the UK, if you saw whale was on the menu, you would do a double take, and I think that's impressive, really, because seafood is so varied that you would be hard pressed to identify a kind of genus or taxa that was completely absent from any sort of menu. But whales, they fit the bill.
Yes, they do. They do. And honestly, I don't know that I would... I mean, I'm always a hypocrite when it comes to what animals I'm going to eat. But that said, I'd be quite glad to not eat whales, especially after hearing all of their singing, because that's something else that I've been interested in reading about whales, is listening to their songs and reading about how they communicate with each other. And a spin-off from that was when I read about spindle cells, because we sort of fall into a little bit of evolution-related speculation. So in whale brains, there are cells that do not exist in most animals, and due to the evolutionary line of whales, it appears that to some extent apes like us and whales have had some form of convergent evolution in terms of neurophysiology. So what I mean by that is we've evolved on separate lines, right? We are mammal, but we come from different ancestors, have branched off from one another, and we've evolved to have certain types of cell in our brain to serve a certain function, and so have they. And why is it interesting? Well, it's interesting because spindle cells, they're thought to be related to some forms of sort of self-awareness, ability to consider things, processing things quickly in like the...
You're saying that whales are very intelligent.
That is essentially what I'm saying, yes. They are intelligent creatures.
They are very, very intelligent creatures, legendarily so. Genetically, they are extremely similar to dolphins, and I think one of the main distinctions is really just how big the animal is, whether it's a whale or a dolphin. There are more considerations beyond that, but normally the cutoff is about 10 meters long, and we often think of the shorter cousins, like the orca or the bottlenose dolphin, as being kind of the powerhouses of oceanic intelligence. But there's definitely something to be said for the intricacy and complexity of whale songs as well. Although all that said, can I ask you whether you find whale songs to be relaxing or calming? Because for me, they are terrifying. If I heard a whale song in the ocean out of nowhere, in the deep blue sea, surrounded by nothing on all sides, I would freak out. Like there's an element of thalassophobia there, maybe, but I would not like to hear a whale song in an environment as uncontrolled as the ocean, even if it was completely harmless, you know?
So yes, I get your question. It's a bit of a depends, because if you listen to the singing Humpback's 38-second clip on the Wikipedia page, no, that sounds like someone. It sounds like it's comes from some sort of a dramatic fiction, maybe a Netflix series about two brothers who've worked out how to record and communicate with a deceased relative in hell. Because it sounds terrifying. It sounds terrifying.
Are you branching out into a Netflix showrunner?
Yeah, I mean, it could work. I could see that working. But yeah, so the humpback whale, they have different sounds that they make for theoretically different reasons, and some of the sounds are nice and some of them are a little frightening. Other whales make different sounds. Some whales make quite nice sounds. If you compare it to, say, the sperm whale, sperm whales, at least the clip on Wikipedia is pretty much a series of clicks, and I think I listened to all of the different sounds for sperm whales, and they are certainly singing would be a weirder way of describing it, because they are just different frequencies of clicks. Although that being said, is it not the case that they can make those clicks extremely high volume? Hence, it's possible to hear them potentially up to 10 kilometers away.
Yes, the sperm whale is, and indeed, this might not be limited to the sperm whale, but in theory, it's never been recorded, luckily, but in theory, if you were too close to a sperm whale in water, when it made kind of a maximum vocalization as terms of how many decibels it could achieve, the sonic shockwave could kill you. Like, sound travels better in water, so it's a little bit disingenuous to compare it to a sound you'd hear through air. But if you were in the deep dark sea and you couldn't see a whale, and then it just vocalized behind you, it could kill you straight out. It's unlikely. Most of their noises are not that loud, and obviously the efficacy of the sound wave decreases very rapidly with distance. But even still, it is a testament to the power of these creatures, whether they be sperm whales or humpback whales. Although I, for one, would prefer to be whale watching on the surface off the coast of Massachusetts or Byron Bay than I would thousands of meters below the surface trying to witness blind fights between sperm whales and giant squid.
No, that would be the best. I would love that. Just in some tiny compressed metal pod with very thick glass windows, using night vision. Yeah. No, it'd be it's definitely worth having a little look at sperm whales and how they hunt if you're interested and are not aware about their clashes with the giant squid deep down, because they have to dive quite far to find them. Yeah, so I found the words I was missing because they weren't on this Wikipedia page. They're on the baleen whale Wikipedia page, which is the family that the brains of humpback whales revealed spindle cells, and it's as far as we understand, in humans, spindle cells play a role in the theory of mind, so the capacity to understand other other individuals by ascribing them mental states. So it could play a role in the sort of highly intelligent social order, of which social order is relevant because whale songs can relate to social order. So, for example, grumbles, inverted commas, are low frequency, longer lasting songs. Sounds, not songs. They're made typically by groups with one or multiple adult males. So they are apparently related to the body size of the individual whale, and therefore could be some sort of attempt at establishing social status there. Whereas in contrast, you've got these thwops and wops, which are frequency modulated. They may serve to allow whales to sort of contact each other within one group or between multiple groups. So you've got a variety of sounds, although I'm not really sure about the nature of full songs, because that's quite an interesting thing. Is sometimes a whale will sing for a full half an hour, and it's really interesting to read how, depending on where in the world this whale comes from, that will affect the units, phrases, and themes within the song. So, similar to an accent or a dialect, these whales pick up singing techniques from where they've come from, but we don't know the full function of these songs. But that's one thing I like about the intriguing mystery of these giant creatures singing their songs for many minutes on end, out kilometers and kilometers into the deep.
Maybe we should close this episode by playing some whale audio from the article.
Are we going to play the horrific one?
The horrific, yeah. I want to convey my impression of them, and I think that audio does a good job. But regardless, I think this is all we have time for today. So thank you very much for listening, and we hope to see you next time.
Goodbye.
Mm.